And for the first time, there was a new school of thought that was chemically induced that made people question the very society they lived in. By 1960, the President of the United States was only 42 years old. Can you imagine? DMX is older than that. And he was going to usher in a new era of peace. He was going to avoid the Cold War. He was going to end segregation. And they blew his brains out in front of everyone in Dallas. This country was never the same.
Right now, if you had them prepare themselves in whatever way they would have to prepare themselves to come to battle, and I bet what I have, everything I have, that meatloaf.
Are there any good white people in the world?
There may be, but it doesn't matter. And you know why? No matter how good an individual white person may be, they have an obligation to look out for the best interests of the white race.
We need to talk about this mess because it's not just a story about one man getting shot. It's a mirror showing us exactly where America is at right now. The reactions flying around tell you everything about the divide we live in. Charlie Kirk's fans are out here spinning their own story, trying to push the idea that black and brown folks are to blame just because nobody's out here crying over him. They want to frame it as cruelty, as though people are heartless for not mourning. But if you really look closer, it's not about people lacking empathy, it's about the receipts. Because this is the same man who once stood on stage and said black people were better off before the civil rights movement because crime rates were lower. Think about that. He looked straight into the cameras and basically implied that black progress brought more harm than good. So when his supporters ask why people aren't sad right now, that's the answer. Folks remember who he really was. And it gets even worse when you realize these are the same crowds who laughed and cheered online when Breonna Taylor's name trended, when Tamir Rice's death came up, when George Floyd's life was taken on camera. They've mocked Black Death for years, yet suddenly they want the country to bow their heads in silence for Charlie Kirk. That double standard is so loud, you can hear it from space. But this isn't just about everyday people. Black celebrities are stepping in, and the split in their reactions shows just how deep this moment cuts. Some are choosing to play it safe, staying quiet, or dropping vague posts that could mean anything. They're probably worried about backlash, about brand deals, about being labeled as insensitive. But then there are others who didn't hesitate for a second, who went full throttle with zero sympathy. And leading that charge was 50 Cent. You already know how he moves. He doesn't do soft. He doesn't do polished PR statements written by some handler in a back room. He goes straight for the jugular every single time. And that's exactly what he did here. He posted a screenshot of the very moment Kirk was shot, no filter, no warning, and slapped a caption on it that basically told the world, "Want to know how I feel about this? I don't know. But I do know it's a good time to shut the fuck up." That's classic 50. No sugarcoating, no pretending, just raw. The reaction was instant. Kirk's supporters lost their minds. They slammed 50 as heartless, called him evil, accused him of dancing on someone's grave. The comment sections on his pages turned into war zones, with people writing things like, "You're done," and "Cancel him for good." Some even crossed the line, throwing out threats like, "Hope you're next." And for a minute, it seemed like the heat got too hot, because just a few hours later, 50 quietly deleted the post. No explanation, no apology, nothing, just gone. But here's the thing, deleting doesn't erase what people already saw, and it doesn't erase what people already felt. And if we're being real, a lot of folks were actually nodding along with him, because from their perspective, Charlie Kirk spent his entire career making fun of black pain, spreading racist conspiracy theories, and mocking victims of police brutality. They saw his downfall as nothing but karma doing its job. One fan even summed it up perfectly, writing, "Don't expect us to cry for a man who never showed us an ounce of empathy. I'm not feeling no sympathy for someone who would call me every slur in the book. Sorry, bookie." That kind of honesty doesn't trend on CNN.
Eric
but
Chauvin
it's the
released.
truth that's buzzing on the streets. Still, not everyone saw it that way. Another person clapped back at the entire reaction, calling it performative nonsense. They argued that people only get loud when it's convenient, but stay dead silent when parents are losing their kids in school shootings. That hit a nerve because it's true, America's outrage button only seems to get pushed for the right faces, the right names, the right causes. And that's where DL Hughley stepped in. You know, DL doesn't bite his tongue. He jumped right into the fire. First, he reposted a TikTok dragging Charlie for one of his wildest takes, the one where he said it's worth having some shooting victims here and there if it means keeping his guns. That's not fake. That's not a meme. That's a direct quote. Charlie Kirk really said on record that some deaths are just the price we pay to keep America armed to the teeth. Let that sink in. And now his supporters want to frame his death as this national tragedy that deserves a wave of sympathy. DL wasn't having it. He kept going, digging deeper, pulling receipts. He shared a clip of Speaker of the House Mike Johnson standing up in front of Congress, asking everyone to pray for Charlie Kirk and his family. And DL, he tore that apart. He called out the wild hypocrisy, asking, has Mike Johnson ever done this for victims of school shootings? Did he pray for Congresswoman Hortman and her husband Mark when they were killed? Those are heavy questions, and the silence on the answers is deafening. But DL wasn't finished. When news broke that Trump himself ordered U.S. flags flown at half-mast for Charlie Kirk, DL snapped again. He reminded people that this is the same Trump who raised the flags back up after the Pope's death, but never once lowered them for children gunned down in schools. Never once lowered them for Congresswoman Hortman. Never once lowered them for Black Americans murdered in cold blood. But for Charlie Kirk, suddenly, it's half-mast, prayers, ceremonies, all of it. DL asked the question out loud. Was Kirk's death tragic? Sure, but does it deserve a national ceremony? He left it up to people to answer for themselves. The message was clear. The double standard is in plain sight. And here's where it gets almost surreal. Charlie Kirk himself once said he couldn't stand the word empathy. He called it a made-up term, said it was weak, said it was dangerous. He mocked it every chance he got, and now his fans are out here begging for the very thing he spent years ridiculing. They want empathy for a man who preached that empathy was weakness. The irony is almost too much to process. DL didn't let that slide either. He dropped a video compilation called Hate and Bigotry, Charlie Kirk's Real Legacy, stringing together clip after clip of Charlie mocking victims, spreading lies, denying facts. And he wasn't done.
I have watched any number of people of all kinds of stripes, people, theologians, politicians, people who consider themselves activists, all kinds of people on the conservative right talk about empathy. And they talked about empathy as if it was a pariah, empathy as if it was a moral failing. And they referred to empathy as a weakness. And it's interesting that they would call themselves Christian.
He resurfaced a clip of Charlie flat out denying that George Floyd was murdered by a cop. He bragged about wanting Derek Chauvin released. That alone was enough to make people's blood boil again. But DL took it even further, hinting at something darker. He reminded everyone of a pattern we've seen before. When Trump got shot, the immediate reaction was to blame the radical left, the liberals, the extremists. But when the truth came out, it turned out the shooter was from his own side. DL suggested the same thing might be true here. He wrote, "Remember when you point a finger at someone, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. That's not just a caption, that's a dagger." Let's be clear, DL wasn't out here celebrating. He wasn't cheering or dancing. What he was doing was breaking down the racial and political optics, showing how violence is treated differently depending on who the victim is and who the shooter is. And that perspective made people uncomfortable. Kirk's fans rushed to accuse him of deflecting, of making excuses, of turning tragedy into politics. But plenty of others saw it differently. They said Kirk's supporters are the ones trying to spin this into a race war, trying to drag black people into the blame game even though they had nothing to do with it. And when those same black voices refused to play along, refused to cry fake tears, that's when the anger really kicked in. And DL wasn't the only one in the crosshairs. Amanda Seales found herself in the fire too. She went live on Instagram, and when people asked her straight up if she had empathy for Charlie Kirk, she didn't dance around it.
I can't have empathy for someone like Charlie Kirk. First of all, Charlie Kirk don't believe in empathy. He said it's a bad thing. He said it's some new age made up shit. He also said people gotta be sacrificed in order to protect guns. If he was saying that while fighting for reparations, I may have a little bit of empathy. But this white on white violence, he died? Damn, B. Life comes at you fast. I can't have empathy for someone like Charlie Kirk because I cannot be in his shoes. I have no frame of reference for that. I have no cognizance for that. There literally is nothing about his existence that I can relate to.
She didn't give a polished diplomatic answer. She flat out said no. She said she couldn't have empathy for him because empathy means stepping into someone else's shoes, and there's nothing about Charlie Kirk's shoes that she could ever connect with. She said she couldn't fake something that didn't exist. That's raw honesty. That's the kind of honesty people claim they want until they actually hear it. The backlash was immediate. Kirk's diehard fans swarmed her comments, filling them with insults, scum, idiot, sociopath, every name in the book. And it wasn't just white folks doing it. Plenty of black men piled on too, calling her every ugly word they could think of. On Twitter, some white commenters even went further, ranting about so-called black fatigue and saying she should be denaturalized or deported. The hate was nonstop, but Amanda wasn't alone. She had defenders flooding in, reminding everyone of Charlie Kirk's record. They pointed out that she wasn't celebrating death. She wasn't cheering. She was just refusing to pretend, refusing to show fake sympathy for a man who never showed black people any. They pulled receipts too, reminding everyone that Charlie himself once called empathy a new age word that was dangerous. He didn't show it, he didn't want it, and he made sure everyone knew that. So why should anyone be forced to give it back to him? One fan said it perfectly. Nowhere in there did she celebrate his death. Nowhere in there did she preach hate. She just said she doesn't have empathy for him. That's not evil, that's not hateful, that's just honest. Another fan summed it up even cleaner. Is it sad he got killed? Yes. But does everyone have to care? No. That's the part the media won't say out loud. Mourning is not mandatory, especially for someone who spent their life mocking the very people now being asked to shed tears. Amanda's refusal to play along actually earned her some deep respect. One fan even compared her to Malcolm X, saying, "The media didn't like Malcolm X either until
There
I
did
really
she celebrate his
listening.
death. Nowhere in there did she espouse hate. She said she doesn't.
Salute to this woman. She's braver and realer than your fave rapper's fave rapper." That's not just praise, that's a stamp. It shows people are hungry for voices willing to stand on truth instead of hiding behind fake civility. Because at the end of the day, the reactions to Charlie Kirk's death aren't just about him. They're about America. They're about what gets remembered, what gets erased, and who gets to decide whose lives are worth crying over. But hold up, we need to talk about Dr. Umar Johnson. A lot of people thought he would stand shoulder to shoulder with Amanda, matching her unapologetic tone, but that's not what happened at all. Instead, Umar came in with a full-on lecture, a sermon almost, and the way he framed things caught a lot of folks off guard. He didn't crack jokes, he didn't join in on the memes, and he definitely didn't throw gasoline on the fire like some people expected. Instead, his message was cautious, almost fatherly, and it landed heavy because it wasn't what the audience was ready to hear. Dr. Umar went on Instagram and dropped a long statement that set the tone real quick. He started by making it clear that he never agreed with Charlie Kirk's rhetoric and, in his words, considered him an anti-black bigot. But here's where he shocked people. Umar said he would never celebrate the loss of life, not even the life of someone who had openly positioned themselves against his community. He wrote, "I will never rejoice at the loss of life of anyone who hasn't directly participated in the killing of a member of the black African race. I am ashamed to see members of my community celebrating this situation." That right there, it flipped the script completely. People who expected Umar to clap back with fire suddenly found themselves listening to a message that felt more like a warning. And he didn't stop there. Umar doubled down, saying, "I will never ask you to mourn the loss of an enemy of our race, but to celebrate a killing is completely unacceptable." That statement cut deep because he reminded people of history. He pointed out that, historically, the biggest victims of political assassinations in America have been black leaders themselves. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Medgar Evers. He was telling his community, don't lose sight of how this game has always been played. To him, laughing at Kirk's death wasn't just tasteless, it was dangerous. His message ended sharp and clear. Stop laughing at the misfortunes of others and get prepared. That last line had a sting to it. It wasn't just about Kirk anymore. It was about what Umar saw coming next. He framed this whole event as proof that political assassinations are creeping back into American life, engineered by the so-called deep state. In his eyes, this wasn't just about one man's death. It was a sign of something much bigger and much darker. But here's where things turn messy. Umar's followers weren't buying it. They clapped back instantly, and the backlash was ruthless. The comment section exploded with people accusing him of softening the blow, of being too preachy, of missing the moment entirely. One person cut especially deep, writing, "I wonder if you would have written this if they shot you." That line stung because it pointed right at the contradiction. It's easy to preach when it's not your life on the line. Others pushed back in a different way, arguing that nobody was truly celebrating Kirk's death. They were just refusing to mourn. To them, there's a big difference between laughing at someone's death and simply not shedding tears over it. And then of course came the wild comments. One fan went completely off saying, 50 lashes for you, Dr. Umar, for posting this. You think any non-black would post something like this for you? Stop giving away your energy to vampires. The internet dragged him from every possible angle. By this point, the whole thing was spinning out of control. The backlash wasn't just about Umar anymore, it was about the fracture in the community. The divide between people who wanted to laugh it off and those who wanted to step back and think bigger. And honestly, that division, that's the ugly truth.
Clinton in the 1990s, it was all about empathy and sympathy. I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that it does a lot of damage, but
whoever orchestrated this hit, whoever pulled the strings behind the scenes, they scored exactly what they wanted. More division, more chaos. The country already feels split down the middle, and this just cracked it wider. Every single reaction, whether it was from celebrities, politicians, influencers, or everyday people, added more fuel to the fire. That uproar, that's not an accident. That's the exact outcome whoever planned this wanted to trigger, to keep us distracted, to keep us fighting, to make sure we're all so busy arguing about the surface drama that we miss the bigger play happening behind the curtain. So now the real question is this: what do you think about the takes from 50 Cent, Dr. Umar, and everyone else who's spoken out? Are we still capable of talking about the bigger picture as a nation? Or are we already too fractured, too caught up in memes and sound bites to realize we're all dancing for the same puppet masters? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's chop it up. And if you're feeling this breakdown, smash that like button and subscribe, because trust me, there's more to come.